Have you ever wondered who Attila the Hun was? If you know nothing about him, he has been called the Scourge of God. So let's do this. Welcome to the channel. Today, we will do our 10 minutes on Attila the Hun. Let's begin. Attila the Hun was a warrior king whose reputation for brutality made him one of the most feared men of his time. He was the king of the Huns from 434 to 453 CE. And during his reign, he led his people on a series of devastating raids across Europe. His military campaigns resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands and possibly even millions of people. Attila's father was King Munjuk, who ruled the Huns with his capital at the city of Keller in southern Ukraine. Little is known about Attila's early life, but it is believed that he spent much of his youth learning the skills of horsemanship and warfare from his father. Around 434 CE, when Munjuk died, Attila took over the throne and inherited a kingdom that was in decline. The Huns were once a powerful and prosperous tribe, but they had recently suffered a number of defeats at the hands of the Goths and other Germanic peoples. Attila wasted no time in turning the situation around. He began to rebuild the Hunnic army and to forge alliances with other nomadic tribes in the region. Under his leadership, the Huns became a formidable force once again. In 437 CE, Attila and his brother Eloch led a coalition of nomadic tribes on a campaign against the Goths. The Huns were victorious, and this victory marked the beginning of Attila's rise to power. In the following years, he continued to expand his empire, conquering vast territories in Eastern and Western Europe. Attila's military success can be attributed to a number of factors. First and foremost, the Huns were an incredibly fierce and disciplined fighting force. They were expert horsemen and archers, and their tactics were both innovative and effective. Additionally, Attila was a brilliant strategist and commander. He was able to inspire his troops to great feats of bravery, and he was also skilled at exploiting the weaknesses of his enemies. Finally, Attila's empire was vast and encompassed many different cultures and peoples. This gave him access to a large pool of soldiers and resources, which he used to great effect. However, despite his military successes, it was not all smooth sailing for Attila. He faced opposition from a number of powerful enemies, including the Eastern Roman Empire, the Visigoths, and the Burgundians. Nevertheless, he was able to defeat all of these enemies and establish himself as the dominant power in Europe. One of the most famous battles of Attila's reign was the Battle of the Catalonian Plains in 451 CE. In this battle, Attila's Hunnic forces faced off against a coalition of Roman and Visigothic troops led by Aetius and Theodoric the Great. The battle was one of the largest and most intense conflicts of the era and resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Although the Huns were ultimately victorious, it was a Pyrrhic victory as they suffered heavy losses as well. Another major event during Attila's reign was his invasion of Italy in 452 CE. Attila and his followers swept through the Italian peninsula, sacking cities and leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. However, they were ultimately unsuccessful in their campaign and were forced to return to Hungary. Some historians believe that Attila's decision to spare Rome from destruction was influenced by the city's reputation as a center of Christianity. It is said that Pope Leo the Great went out to meet Attila and persuaded him to spare the city. Whether or not this story is true is debated by historians, but it is clear that Rome was not sacked, which may have been due in part to the efforts of Pope Leo, despite his military victories. It is important to note that Attila's empire was not a traditional state in the modern sense of the word. It was a loose confederation of nomadic tribes that were united under the banner of the Huns. There were no permanent settlements or institutions, and the empire was entirely dependent on the military strength of the Huns. As Attila's empire grew, so did his wealth and power. He amassed a fortune in gold, silver, and other valuables through his military campaigns, and he established a mint at his capital in order to produce his own coins, despite his wealth. However, there is little evidence that Attila engaged in any significant building projects or other forms of public works. Instead, he used his wealth to maintain a large army and to purchase luxury goods for himself and his court. Attila's personal life is shrouded in mystery, as there are few historical records that provide details about his family or personal relationships. What little is known about his personal life comes from a combination of Roman and Germanic sources, many of which are often contradictory or unreliable. According to some sources, Attila had several wives and concubines, but the names and origins of these women are not known. He is known to have had at least one son named Eloch II, who succeeded him as the ruler of the Huns after his death. However, information about Eloch II and other members of the royal family is scarce. When Attila died in 453 CE, his empire quickly fell apart. The various nomadic tribes that had been incorporated into his confederation broke away, and the Huns were eventually absorbed into other Germanic peoples. Despite the short duration of the Hunnic Empire, its impact on Europe was profound. The Huns had a major influence on the culture and history of the continent, and their legacy continues to be felt today. So now let's take a look at some of the reasons why Attila is considered the Scourge of God. First and foremost, Attila was a ruthless and merciless warrior. He showed no mercy to his enemies and was willing to do whatever it took to defeat them. This is evident in the countless cities and towns that he sacked and the hundreds of thousands of people that he murdered. Additionally, Attila's invasions and conquests caused widespread destruction and devastation across Europe. He and his followers pillaged and looted as they went, leaving a trail of death and destruction in their wake. This had a devastating impact on the people and economies of the regions that he conquered. Moreover, Attila's empire was built on the foundation of war and conquest. He was constantly at war with neighboring tribes and kingdoms, and his military campaigns resulted in the deaths of countless people. This constant state of conflict and violence contributed to the instability and insecurity of the era. Furthermore, Attila's reputation for brutality and cruelty was widespread and well known throughout Europe. His enemies were terrified of his wrath, and his very name was enough to strike fear into their hearts. This reputation only added to the devastation and destruction that he caused, as those who opposed him did so knowing that they were up against a truly ruthless and merciless warrior. Overall, Attila the Hun was a truly fearsome and destructive force who left a lasting impact on European history. His reputation for brutality and cruelty has endured for centuries, and he remains one of the most feared and infamous figures of all time. Now, if you want to learn more about the Huns, check out the video on the left. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something new.